Black Clover is an anime and manga all about magic. So when translating that into a video game, what genre do you choose? RPG? Turn-based? Action? No, none of those. You choose a third-person Overwatch clone? Well, that just so happens to be what Bandai Namco thought was the best choice with their third-person magical shooter, Black Clover Quartet Knights. I do, however, prefer this genre over what anime games typically are, which are 3D arena fighting games, because the vast majority of those tend to be pretty bad. But an anime game that is not an arena fighter does not guarantee success, which Black Clover Quartet Knights proves wholeheartedly, as it had a unique genre but is essentially dead on arrival. This is the Black Clover game that everyone forgot about. The fact that Black Clover was receiving a game was first revealed on December 5th, 2017 with a 16-second long teaser announcing the development of Black Clover Project Knights. This trailer revealed next to nothing besides the art style and the fact that Black Clover was getting a game. Black Clover Quartet Knights was first officially revealed in an announcement trailer on December 18th, 2017. It was marketed as a cross between a fantasy game and a third-person shooter, featuring 4 vs 4 battles. And I am sure that this decision had something to do with the fact that hero shooters were becoming increasingly popular around this time, with Overwatch and Paladins having been released the year prior. However, I do think it's a cool idea for an anime game, and is much more unique than what we would normally get, aka an arena fighter. Something interesting with this genre reveal is that a lot of people got confused thinking that it was an arena fighter, despite the fact that the trailer quite literally said Fantasy X third-person shooter. Another recurring comment from viewers was that it was too soon for a Black Clover game. For context, the reveal trailer was released on December 18th, 2017, and the anime had begun airing on October 3rd, 2017. Even though the manga had been published since February 16th, 2015, it did seem fairly sudden for a Black Clover game, considering most games are based solely on where the story is in the anime, not the manga. However, Black Clover was quickly gaining popularity, and as the new shonen kid on the block, I can 100% see why Bandai would want to cash in on the Black Clover hype as quickly as possible. And the game also wouldn't be released until 2018, so they could use manga content that would become anime content by the time it actually released. Our next trailer wouldn't be released until February 2nd, 2018, where we get to see some true gameplay alongside an explanation of one of the game's modes, that being zone control. This trailer confirmed that the game would in fact be a third-person shooter and not an arena fighter. It was too soon to judge the game fully, as this was in development footage, but a lot of people seemed to like what they were seeing so far. We would get a second game mode trailer 2 months later on April 13th, 2018, revealing Treasure Hunt mode. You would continuously get more game mode and character reveal trailers leading up to launch, one of note being the Story Mode trailer, which revealed that the game would be receiving an original story full of time travel shenanigans. An original story for an anime game is always a welcome addition, when done right. But a lot of people seemed excited about this, especially considering the fact that there would be original anime scenes created for the game, which is also pretty cool. The trailer ended with a release date reveal of September 14th, 2018. Our final trailer came in the form of a launch trailer on September 14th, 2018, and fans were still hyped, a lot of whom were excited for an anime game that wasn't an arena fighter, and also a lot who were saying that it looked better than Shinobi Striker. But with most anime games, when looking in retrospect, should they have really been excited at all? No, not really. Hey, did you see the new Black Clover game released today? Yeah. See, the joke here is that when the game released, no one cared because there were like no players when the game released. Black Clover Quartet Knights released on September 14th, 2018 to mixed reviews. It currently sits at a 53 critic score and a 6.7 user score on Metacritic. In terms of Steam charts, the game launched with only 84 players in its launch month before dropping to 28 players the following month. In a multiplayer team-based game that relies heavily on online play, this was the worst case scenario. There are a number of reasons why Quartet Knights failed, and what do you know? Most of them boiled down to Bandai Namco trying to make a quick buck. Who could have guessed? From a rushed game, to a lackluster marketing attempt, to another anime game that overshadowed this one, to just pure problems with the game itself, let's go over why everyone quickly forgot about Black Clover Quartet Knights. Black Clover Quartet Knights is a third-person shooter comprised of 4 vs 4 team battles. The core of the game is meant to be played online, working together with your team to complete an objective before the enemy team does. There's only one other person online when I was. But luckily, you can play offline against bots, which is what I did. That entirely defeats the purpose of a team-based game, but you gotta do what you gotta do. Characters are divided into one of 5, really 4, classes, each with their own roles to play in battle. The first class includes fighters, who focus on dealing close range damage. Some will use melee attacks. The second class includes shooters who deal long range damage. The third class is support, who either boosts and defends their teammate, or sabotages their enemies. The final true class includes healers who heal. There is technically a final class, which is the Wizard King, but that's exclusive to one character. Why did they think that was necessary? I don't know. But the idea is that each team would be composed of one of each class in order to have a balanced composition. Moving on from classes, there are 20 playable characters, with 3 of those being paid DLC and 2 being unlockable. They're almost evenly divided amongst each class, with healers and shooters having 4, whilst fighters have 6, while support have 5. And then of course, the Wizard King has 1. I'd say 20 characters is a fairly good amount, but I think DLC characters for a game of this nature is a little unfair. At least when Shinobi Strikers did it, you could still play as each DLC character without buying them, but here if you don't buy them then you just can't play as them. Simple as that. Let's get into the actual gameplay. Each character will be equipped with their own set of abilities in addition to their regular attacks. For almost all of the characters, except for a couple, these basic attacks will be ranged attacks, hence the reason why this is a third-person shooter. And you know what? I actually quite like the gameplay. I can't think of another anime game that has gameplay like this. The closest would be Shinobi Striker, but the game still feels wildly different. However, just because I like the concept doesn't mean that the execution is flawless. Like most anime games, it's fairly unpolished, which leads to some clunky and often floaty gameplay that's not really befitting of a third-person shooter of this nature. I can't really speak to how well the abilities are balanced or how well characters synergize with one another, because I have literally no one to play with, but based on reviews I've read, they aren't balanced very well, which is to be expected from a low-budget anime game. Let's talk about game modes. There are 3 game modes in total. The first is Zone Control. It is your run-of-the-mill control mode. Each team is fighting to gain control of the target area by standing in the outlined zone. It's a staple of hero-based shooters, so not really much else to say besides it's zone control. The second game mode is Crystal Carry. Despite the somewhat unique name, this is just escort or payload or whatever you want to call it. When one team must escort an object across a predetermined path, whilst the enemy team tries to stop them. Crystal Carry functions like Overwatch's hybrid mode, where it first starts as a zone control and whoever wins the zone must then escort the crystal. However, if they fail to escort the crystal entirely to the end zone, then the enemy team gets a chance to try, where they simply must get the crystal farther than the original team did. It's set up differently than most payload modes, but it still functions essentially the same. The final mode is Treasure Hunt, which is the only unique game mode here. In Treasure Hunt, there are keys that will spawn one at a time. Each team will try to claim said key before the other team does. Once a key is claimed, a chest will spawn somewhere on the map, and the team with the key will attempt to bring the key to the chest and open it while the opposing team will try to stop them. Each team can earn a point by either opening the chest or preventing the team with the key from opening the chest, and the first team to 5 points wins. As the only unique game mode, I wasn't a big fan. I found it kinda stupid that you could earn points by stopping the other team from opening the chest. I thought it would have made more sense if you could kill the holder of the key, then steal it and open the chest for yourself, but nope. If you kill the key holder, then you just get a point, which is honestly just much easier than trying to open the chest for yourself. And that's it for game modes. There is not a single elimination based mode, which is stupid, as that should be the easiest game mode to implement. On top of that, there's no capture the flag, no king of the hill, no free for all. If they were just gonna rip off other hero shooter game modes, why not just copy them all, or at least just give us one elimination based mode like Team Deathmatch. I like the basic gameplay foundation, it feels different from most other hero shooters, but the game modes and amount of game modes leaves a lot to be desired. There's no staple game mode like Star Wars Battlefront 2 has with Galactic Assault, there's not a wide variety of game modes like TF2, there's nowhere near the level of team play or strategy as Overwatch, and while I like the gameplay, without any unique game modes, it's overall not as interesting as Shinobi Striker, which has equally as unique gameplay, plus more game modes. Okay, I might have only had one more game mode at release, but that's still one more than Black Clover had. However, like I mentioned before, the online is completely dead, so maybe if the game were alive then these game modes would be enough to suffice, but as it stands, and from my experience of playing these modes against NPCs, they are not unique or interesting, despite the fun gameplay at its core. So the online modes aren't worth it, which leaves us with the story mode. The story mode is an original non-canon story written exclusively for the game. I'm personally not a fan of the Black Clover anime and manga, so for the most part I didn't really know what was going on, but I think I get the general gist. Yami from the past is teleported to the present, whilst present Yami disappears. Young Yami interacts with the Black Bulls, and half of the story is time spent dicking around with the Bulls before the actual story starts, and this girl Karna Fries from Yami's past seeks revenge on the Clover Kingdom after her father is killed. It's got some time travel shenanigans going on, which means that it's not canon in any sense of the word. Like I said, I'm not a big fan of Black Clover, so I didn't feel invested in the story at all. I guess it could be cool for fans to see young Yami and learn about some of his past, but in the end, it's not canon, so it doesn't really matter in the grand scheme of things. In terms of the presentation, there are 3 different types of cutscenes: original anime cutscenes, 3D animated cutscenes, and PNGs with text boxes, none of which look very good. It's neat that they got original anime cutscenes animated for the game, but they all look very cheap and choppy. The PNGs are incredibly lazy and are essentially just a slideshow, and the 3D animated cutscenes aren't terrible, they're nothing great, but it is pretty jarring to keep jumping back and forth between the 3 styles. But how is the gameplay structured? So the missions are divided into 2 sections: 10 missions following Asta's perspective, and 8 missions following Yami's perspective. Yes, it is very short, with an average completion time of 3.5 hours on how long to beat. And the missions themselves are more often than not just regular matches. But when they aren't regular matches, they're either boss fights, PvE battles, or team deathmatches. Now, why couldn't they have given us team deathmatch as an online mode when it is literally in the story mode? The regular matches are the same as before, and the PvE battles and the boss fights are stupid easy. You just spam attacks over and over until the enemies are dead. It requires literally 0 effort. Looking at the lack of content and the underwhelming story mode, it's no surprise why this died on launch. However, there are a couple of other reasons that also contributed to its demise. Aside from my aforementioned points, there are 3 other reasons that can be attributed to Quartet Knights' dead on arrival label. It was too soon for a Black Clover game, it was overshadowed by Shinobi Striker, and the online was bad. Let's start with that last point, which just so happens to be the simplest one. If you've played any Bandai Namco anime game joint, then you know the drill. The online is probably poorly optimized, and that was the case with Quartet Knights. Bandai never invests anything into their anime game's netcode, so they'll usually run like ass, meaning the matches will play out like slideshows. The next point is that it was simply too soon for Black Clover to get a game. When Black Clover started airing, it was seen as the next big shonen anime, which is why Bandai wanted to cash in on its popularity as quickly as possible, by releasing a game the year after it started airing, and announcing that game 2 months after it started airing. However, there were 2 problems with this strategy. The first was a lack of content to build off of. They had clearly started development before the anime even started airing, which means they used manga content in-game in the hopes that the anime would catch up by the time of release, but there was no guarantee where the anime would be by then, which is what I suspect is the reason why they went with an original story over a rehash of the anime story. But the other, bigger problem is that Black Clover wasn't liked very much when it first started airing. What was meant to be the next shonen staple like My Hero Academia had become a couple years prior, was instead the laughingstock of shonen anime that everyone quickly pointed fingers at as being lazy and generic. Due to this, not many people really wanted a Black Clover game, considering the fact that they didn't even like the anime. And I think Bandai realized this because leading up to release they didn't do very much marketing for this game, which ultimately leads me to my final point. Naruto's Boruto Shinobi Striker released on August 31st, 2018, while Black Clover and Quartet Knights released on September 13th, 2018. Doing some simple math here, we get a 13-day difference. So if you're looking to get a 4 vs 4 team-based action anime game, and you can only afford one, would you rather buy the one based off of one of the most successful and popular anime in the world, or would you buy the one based off the anime that everyone loved to hate? On top of that, while I like the idea of a third-person shooter based on an anime, I don't feel like Black Clover was the right choice. And while it is an interesting concept, and despite the fact that Shinobi Striker isn't a shooter, what it did with its movement and combat ends up being more interesting than a third-person Black Clover shooter. Of course, we can't blame Shinobi Striker for Quartet Knights' failure, because they are completely different games, but we can't ignore the fact that it must have taken some sales away from Quartet Knights. Black Clover Quartet Knights had potential. From a genre standpoint, it attempted to do something that not many other anime games had. I know I've constantly compared it to Shinobi Striker, but while both are 4 vs 4 team-based games, Shinobi Striker focuses more on close-range fighting, whereas Quartet Knights really is more of a third-person shooter. However, Black Clover, at least at the time, was not the property that should have received this treatment. Bandai seemed to realize that somewhere along development, and ultimately decided to release it anyways. But that doesn't mean that if Black Clover was more popular, the game would have been any better. The lack of content, boring story mode, and laughable online are all key elements of a Bandai Namco anime game. Because of these faults, the game died on launch, and despite a couple of DLC releases, it quickly fell into obscurity, which is really disappointing. Both because now Bandai thinks that Black Clover doesn't deserve an anime game, but also because now they'll probably not try another anime third-person shooter. If you're looking to play a Black Clover game, I can't really recommend this, especially at its full price of $50. However, if you are a huge fan of the series, and can pick up the game on sale, perhaps around $10, I'd say you get at least a few hours of enjoyment out of trying the characters and messing around in offline modes, but beyond that, there's no reason to buy this game now. Not like there was at launch either. I wish Quartet Knights was better. Despite liking parts of it, I still have to admit that it is a bad game. And I feel like I say this in every single video, but the cycle stays the same. Bandai announces a new game for a popular anime, it looks like it could have some potential or do something interesting, Bandai rushes the release of it in order to cash in on the popularity of the IP, and then it fails on launch. And this happens over and over and over